You're listening to a podcast of Spurious Morality.
Hello and welcome to a podcast of Spurious Morality. I'm Johnston and with me I have Connor. Hello, Connor.
Hello.
And today we are going to pick up where we left off in the first part of a 2023 of Spurious Morality, and we're going to talk about some of our favourite Big Finish releases in the second half of this year, so July until now. So it was a good second half of the year, actually. I think that we've had some pretty decent stuff over the last few months, and it's going to be nice to sort of journey through everything from my summer listening. You know, I remember lying on a sun lounger next to a pool in Morocco listening to James Robert McCrimmon. And then I remember sitting on a freezing cold bus listening to In the Bleak Midwinter only a few weeks ago. So yes, it's been a varied 6 months. So we'll jump straight in. Obviously, there are spoilers for some pretty recent Big Finish releases, and we might refer back to other stuff. So there are going to be spoilers in here. So you have been warned. Here we are, time traveling in our TARDIS yet again. Insert sound effect here, possibly. Depends if I can be bothered or not.
What does our control room look like?
I quite like the idea of it having a jukebox.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? That makes a lot of sense for all those Big Finish finals.
Yes, obviously. I'm thinking like maybe the 80s, like the Five Doctors onwards control room. Actually, no, scrap that. The Five Doctors onwards control room as it was done in Battlefield, but with a jukebox.
Oh, yes, nice. And microphones everywhere.
Yes, that is what the official Spodcast TARDIS possibly looks like. With cardboard cutout roundels on the wall. Should we talk about July releases now?
Yeah.
Okay. So July, there was some good stuff in July. I'd like to say I have lovely memories of lying in 35-degree plus heat next to a swimming pool, drinking mojitos and listening to James Robert McCrimmon for the first time, which I believe you've gone for as pick of the month, Connor. So yeah, talk to us about James Robert McCrimmon.
Yeah, so I really like these new Second Doctor adventures. I was a little bit apprehensive at the beginning with the changeover between Fraser Hines into Michael Troughton. But I think Michael Troughton has absolutely knocked it out of the park and has really settled into the role of the Doctor now. And happily, we very happily get Fraser Hines back as Jamie in this one, and that's really good to hear him again. So yeah, it's a really strong set. We get the Doctor and Raven on this adventure in Edinburgh, reintroducing them to Jamie, and we hear a bit about what he has been up to in the intervening years since he left the Doctor, since he was forced out of the Doctor's company. We get an incredible second story, which does something I love, where you get a little bit of a call forward, and you get the Second Doctor versus some Krynoids, or a Krynoid. which I love doing, where you get doctors meeting monsters out of order, and earlier doctors meeting monsters that first appeared later in the TV series. I think that's a lot of fun to do it in the early adventures with the Sontarans as well. So I really enjoyed that episode. I'd probably highlighted it as my favourite of that little set. But we also get a little bit of movement onwards in the form of the Doctor and Jamie rebelling against Raven slightly. And I'm interested to see what happens there, because she's not going to be gone forever. The influence of the Time Lords is not going to be out of there forever. I'm interested to see how this goes, and I'm enjoying this little. It's not quite the take on season 6B that I think we know and love as Doctor Who fans. It's a little bit different, and we're getting our eyes open slightly to what it was actually like for them. But I'm enjoying it, and I'm very excited to see where this goes. I think we've said this a few times on the podcast, but the second Doctor, I think in particular, definitely needs to be upped to 2 sets a year to match the other Doctors, because we're still at the moment only getting 1. And it's I love this little story arc that we're getting at the moment with them under the Time Lord's thumb, and I would like a little more of it. So 2 box sets next year, please.
I'm in total agreement with you. I'm really enjoying this storyline. It's really interesting. It's an absolutely fantastic take on the second Doctor. It's a great concept. I'm really glad Jamie's back as well. That has added something. But there's just not enough of it. Like 3 discs a year? No. We need more. We need a lot more. And in fact, it should be like the biggest thing Big Finish have. It should be like 6 box sets a year. Should outdo Eccleston. Maybe that's a bit too much. But no, honestly, same with the first Doctor Adventures as well, actually. I would really, really like to see these go up to 2 sets a year to match everything else. And I'm not entirely sure why the 60s is relegated to a single set each Doctor. But hopefully that's something moving forward will be slightly different. My pick for July is, well, it's Torchwood Among Us 3, but really what it is all of Torchwood Among Us, which just happened to conclude in July. And I really enjoyed it. I think that it's, and we've said this on this podcast before, it's perhaps the least consistent of the 3 continuation Torchwood series we've had, but it's nevertheless an awful lot of fun. There's some great stories in there, really great ideas, and this 4th set where the whole team kind of come together, and we kind of get a look at what Torchwood is going to be from now on, I guess, because we've lost a main character and quite a lot's happened, and we've established that there's something Torchwood-esque in Iceland where Gwen and Rhys are living, and so yeah, it's brought in a few more elements that seem to be fairly consistently building up to something, and I'm certainly looking forward to us having more Torchwood moving forward, more continuing Torchwood. It's been a good year for Torchwood, actually. The monthly range has expanded a bit as well, as we said last time, mentioning Double, and we've had the Ood trilogy over the last few months, and that's been very, very good. But Torchwood Among Us 3, an awful lot of fun, and I will be re-listening to all 3 continuation series sometime soon, because they're really, really great. They're really sort of good top tier Big Finish. We'll on the subject of concluding storylines, concluding sets, let's travel forward to August. So that's a speedy TARDIS sound effect there, moving us from one to another. August. And one of my favourite releases of August, and in fact it's been one of my favourite runs the last couple of years, it was Purity Unbound, the 6th Doctor Adventures, kind of concluding that 6th Doctor Mel and Hebe arc that started out in Waterworlds, and I think all 4 sets have just been absolutely excellent. They've been very different, they've done very different things, but told one continuous almost story, or certainly had a very, very, very strong continuous arc moving through them. It was a great conclusion. I'm really glad that it ended that way. I mean, I've heaped tons and tons of praise on this run before, so I've got very little new to say about it. But yeah, it was definitely a favourite of mine. What about you, Connor? Did you enjoy Purity Unbound?
I did. I love the whole series. I think this was a very worthy conclusion to it. So regular listeners will know that we just lose our mind. We lost our minds over this at the time, and we lose our minds over it every time it comes up because we thought it was an incredibly strong series. And it was nice to get that little bit of an arc breathed into the Sixth Doctor adventures. I said at the time it felt very reminiscent of the Sixth Doctor's early run, mainly by virtue of reminding us in the form of Evelyn, who gets mentioned very often. But it felt good to have a Doctor get a new companion again and have that stronger story arc, that very deliberately plotted and well-planned arc, which I thought was the biggest thing going for the Purity stories, is that you did feel while you were listening to them like you were in safe hands and there was an intention and a very definite direction of travel for the series. So I loved that. Really engaging listening. Have yet to listen to them through as a series, one after the other. I'm intending to do that very early in the new year, and I'm excited to hear it. But I think this is one of the best Big Finish teams currently, ongoing. And I'm really excited to hear more from them. I must say it was very, very surreal to watch the Giggle, Doctor Who's 60th anniversary, one of the 60th anniversary programs, and see Mel on screen with Hebe, but not Hebe, in the form of Shirley. I loved seeing those two together. I'm delighted they got to work together on TV, Doctor Who, and I would love to see it again. Just a nice little bit of a Big Finish connection in the 60th anniversary as well.
Yes, it did. Obviously, the same thing occurred to me. I thought it was great. And I do hope that Mel and Shirley being on screen and part of unit together doesn't stop us from having further Hebe adventures, because obviously that set ended with the storyline pretty definitively concluding, but Hebe continuing to travel in the TARDIS. And I was slightly concerned it would sort of end her travels, but nope, she's carried on in the TARDIS with the Doctor and Mel, and there's another period at the end, very end really, of the Sixth Doctor's life that can still be explored. So I'm excited for that to be picked up. Might be a while before it's picked up. I'm fine with it being a few years, but I hope we don't lose this TARDIS team. Do you have another pick from August?
Yes, I really enjoyed this year's Ninth Doctor selection. I only remember this earlier on, actually, but we've had a little bit of a break in the Ninth Doctor this year as well. For the first time since he came back in 2021, and I'm really feeling it. I'm really missing his adventures at the moment, and I really hope we'll get to the new ones fairly soon. But we got Travel in Hope as well. The highlight of which surely has to be the Ninth Doctor and Alpha Centauri. I don't think anyone could have predicted that would happen whenever it was announced that Christopher Eccleston was going to come back and play the Ninth Doctor again. But here we are. We have a Ninth Doctor meets Alpha Centauri very early on in Alpha's life, and I said this at the time, but I really like that this was an Alpha Centauri story and not a Peladon story, although it would be wonderful to get more of those as well. But I really enjoyed that. It was nice to hear the Ninth Doctor up with a familiar character in the way we have had him meet Liv and the Brigadier as well. I think Alpha Centauri is a very worthy addition to that lineup.
I think that Alpha Centauri, across everything, TV, Big Finish, whatever, just hasn't had enough. I think they're such a great character, and I think that there's more that can be done with them than, just Peladon, which is kind of what we got here. It was nice to explore that. So I certainly hope there's more of that sort of thing moving forward. Yeah. Let's deploy the TARDIS sound effect again. We're travelling through time in our Battlefield TARDIS with a jukebox. And it's just like that, September. A month where...
Does it have a coffee machine?
No coffee machine.
Are those banned on TARDISes now?
Let's face it, you'd spill coffee on the console straight away.
Oh no, I've done it again.
Like we'd end up at the end of the edge of the universe, and you wouldn't even use salt to defeat a villain. You'd just knock the salt over after you'd knocked the coffee over.
Who would do a silly thing like that?
I have no idea at all. But I think we can all agree that the last thing we need are like two of each of us.
More of us.
Yeah, let's not do that. I couldn't keep up with the editing.
I was going to say you could edit us into the right and left channels.
Oh, that would be terrifying and time consuming. So, okay, we briefly stopped off at the end of the universe and chucked a bit of salt about, and now we've arrived in September, where my ongoing and forever will be favourite sort of branch of Big Finish got this year's release, Gallifrey War Room Manoeuvres, which I just thought was an excellent set. It's actually what I want from my Gallifrey, particularly now that Gallifrey is well into the Time War. We got kind of political machinations, which is what Gallifrey is famous for, really, really well done in a Time War setting, and there was a nice little arc running through the set. There are wider arcs running through the whole series, and Romana's absence is still very much felt, and it's sort of held over Leela, do as you're told or Romana gets it, and how Leela just puts herself through absolute Time War hell because of that threat is just, it's amazing. Another really, really good set, another great group of stories, and Narvin's back properly in this one as well. He was kind of in one episode of the first set. He's properly in this one. He's back to being regular in every episode, Narvin, as he should be. What about you? What was your September pick?
I think I said this in the last episode, but I'm a huge fan of the Fifth Doctor adventures this year. I thought very, very understated, but brilliant. I can't remember if that's quite the turn of phrase I used, but it's the turn of phrase I'm going to use this time. We have Pursuit of the Nightjar and Resistor. I think it's probably fair to say that Pursuit of the Nightjar is the highlight here. I think it was incredible. Very, very personal and intimate story. Just a wonderful little bit of proper character drama in the Fifth Doctor's era. And it's one again that I've picked to do my little end of year lineup of favourite stories. It's one of the ones that's going to be in my last week of listening for 2023, which is the highest honour I can bestow as a Big Finish listener. So that's going very, very easily and very happily to Pursuit of the Nightjar. But I really loved Resistor as well. I think this has been described as a slightly more cynical take on Arc of Infinity, dropping the Fifth Doctor, Nyssa and Tegan, into a European country in their contemporary time. But this time it's a little further east. It's sort of a little more behind the Iron Curtain than Amsterdam. And again, it's just really, really good. I'm actually really looking forward to doing these two sets back to back as well, just to do a little series of them. I actually did 40 back to back fairly recently as well, and thought it was a really strong little run. Whenever you're listening to it and you're getting the answers in fairly quick succession. I think my favourite thing about Resistor is the bit where the Fifth Doctor gets up to replace the drummer in the band and turns out to be quite good. It's not something you'd expect of the Fifth Doctor, but it's just a nice little moment. I really like that. So yeah, really strong set, and I just love the Fifth Doctor. I love the Fifth Doctor's era, and I love getting to hear these characters again.
I completely agree with what you said about 40, actually. I went back and did it all as one series this year, and it really benefited from me hearing it all together. Because I think, was it one episode, sorry, one box set in January and one box set in September or something like that? There was a
Yeah, they were
huge
really
gap.
far apart.
And actually, I think Autumn Infinity requires you to have heard the previous two stories pretty soon beforehand to fully appreciate what's going on. But yeah,
Pretty
it
much.
certainly went up. I mean, I didn't dislike it before, but it certainly went up in my estimations second time round. And it's always nice when that happens. As for this year's Fifth Doctor offerings, yeah, it's all been great. We've had two very good sets. I think this was the strongest set of the two. But yeah, just like some really, really good stories, some really interesting stuff. And I kind of hope we do get some kind of arc for the Fifth Doctor at some point down the line. But what we've had this year, just sort of nice and standalone, and in the early part of season 20, it's worked really, really well for me. I did particularly enjoy Pursuit of the Nightjar, and it was a very small cast. It was a four-parter carried by four people, and it's been a while, I think, since we had something that really sort of nice and slow-paced from Big Finish. It was a proper good character piece, and I think that, yes, we have had plenty of early season 20 character pieces before. We had the entire Mark arc, which was very, very character focused, and there was a lot of stuff going on in that investigated the relationships between the Fifth Doctor and Nyssa and Tegan in the aftermath of Earthshock. But Pursuit of the Nightjar it lifted away a little bit of that baggage and actually let them kind of be characters together without the ghost of Adric hanging over them. And I don't think we've had a lot of that. I think the obvious go-to in that era is let's all feel bad about Adric, and actually let's just talk to each other in a different context, in a normal context. I thought was quite nice, and it was full of brilliant Tegan and Nyssa moments as well. So yeah, very, very good story. Definitely a standout of the year.
I'm a big, big fan of stories that, I was going to say, don't necessarily have a villain. There is a wee bit of a villain here in this one. But it's stories that, where characters are trapped in space and they're sort of up against the elements rather than any malicious action. There's a really great, it's a very short game. But I've played it on PlayStation. I think it's PlayStation exclusive. Can't quite remember. It's called Observation. It's only a couple of hours long. It's very short. It's not going to keep you occupied for days. It's a real love letter to stuff like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Just your character's on a space station. It's suddenly, something goes wrong. They're trapped, and they have to sort of try and keep themselves alive against the hostile environment of space. I think Pursuit of the Nightjar really feels like that, where they're trying to keep this rackety old ship going. And there's this sort of impending threat in the form of the other ship as well. So very, very strong. Love that sort of story.
Yeah, it's certainly not the first time Big Finish has done something like that, but it still feels like a nice rare treat when it does. And I'm really glad that we did just get this 4 episodes of slower paced character stuff, which was very enjoyable, very well written, very well done, performed, and everything. Let's move on to October then. And October had some pretty good stuff, but I think the standout has to be the Third Doctor Adventures: Intelligence for War, where we got a pretty brilliant Third Doctor Season 7 7-parter, and it gave us a little bit more about Liz. There was some really good Liz material in there, and it's starting to feel now like we've actually got a decent set of Liz stuff from Big Finish, and I'm really glad that we're doing proper 7-parters. We are sticking to that Season 7 format. It was just really, really enjoyable, and it's it really did feel as though it could have just jumped out of that season. It could have been done in 1970 and it'd have been nice and believable and, thoroughly good unit story. What about you, Connor? Was your standout intelligence for war?
I did enjoy it. I thought I'm really enjoying these little 7-parter stories that they're doing for the Third Doctor's era. And I'm loving that they're expanding on season 7. I think I would probably name Torchwood Odyssey as my favourite from this month, though, because I love the Satan Planet and the Impossible, or the Satan Pit and the Impossible Planet. I think they're probably my 2 favourite 10th Doctor episodes, and a big reason why I love them is it's Ida Scott, really. It's Ida Scott and the other characters from that station. And we bring back Ida. Her actress has been in a few things. She's Levchenka's sister. She was in the Out of Time stories with David Tennant. But this is the first time she's back playing Ida again. I thought Ida was one of the best companion that got away characters that we've ever had. So I think I think it's great that she's back and the other characters are back as well. I know we've had Zachary back before as well, and it's nice to get a wee bit of a sequel to that story. Or a spiritual sequel to that story, in the form of another futuristic Torchwood detective story. I think that's a really great vibe to go for. But Torchwood Odyssey is wonderful. It expands on Ida. We get to see her, get to meet her family, get a bit more about her background. I just think it's a great idea to project forward into this era of Torchwood and make use of those characters. And it's very, very accessible for someone like me who's not got the most experience with Torchwood, but is aware of them, or is very aware of them through Doctor Who. And it's nice to visit this era, which sort of predates the Torchwood TV show in terms of real world chronology. This came out, well before Torchwood TV series was a thing. These were probably some of the first Torchwood characters we met. So it's very cool to hear them again.
I've never actually been the biggest fan of Impossible Planet and Satan Pit. I don't think it's a bad story, but it doesn't have this sort of highlight of Series 2, highlight of David Tennant's era status for me. It's just a 2-parter that that's there. However, I do have to completely agree with you that the one thing that really made it was such a really good set of guest characters. And I'm glad that a few of them got away. In some ways, I kind of wish a few more would survive. Was the security guy, was he Mr. Jefferson? Was he?
Yeah, I think he was done in the ventilation shaft.
Yeah.
Again, he was a great character.
He didn't get ooded. He suffocated before he got ooded in the ventilation shaft. And I kind of wish...
Yes.
I kind of wish that from a Big Finish point of view, he'd have survived, because I think he'd have been an interesting character to kind of revisit. And
could always do him before the Satan Pit.
We could, yes. That's definitely an option. Hinty, hint, 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 Big Finish. I've enjoyed the trilogy. Let's just take a moment actually to just talk about the Torchwood trilogy. I know, and I think that the highlight of it was Whodunit. Not only is it probably the best named anything Big Finish have ever done, I really like that. As you say, it was a spiritual sequel to the previous Zachary Cross Flame story. And it brought back, I'm trying to remember the name of his AI companion. Is it Chloe?
I think so.
Yeah. It brought back, a pretty interesting character, actually. We're equal partners until he wipes my memory, which he does quite often. It's a really interesting sort of ethical little aside. And obviously, Chloe can be a little bit manipulative and not 100% trustworthy, should we say. It's a really interesting dynamic, and I hope we get more of that. But yeah, it's this little Ood trilogy, which did start with Odyssey, has been pretty good. It's been a nice little sidestep, and I hope we do get more from these characters. I kind of hope that these 3 stories have been a bit of a backdoor pilot for, Torchwood in the future or whatever it is. It'll have a better name than that. I hope it has a better name than that. But yeah, Torchwood 43rd century type thing. Because I think that there's a lot that can be done with these characters. I think that concept has been proved. And like you say, Ida's great and should have been a companion. Definitely a companion that got away. I can't think of anybody before that in New Who, except maybe Linda with a Y, obviously.
Yeah, you could argue there was Adam, but he sort of got his chance, and it's a different dynamic there. He got his chance and ruined it.
Yeah, he's the companion that got sent away.
Yeah.
Also, I'm going to give a very quick honourable mention to the Union as well, which was the concluding part of Once and Future, the sort of 60th anniversary celebratory series from Big Finish, which it did something different. It played with the concept of regeneration, which, you know, the Giggle ended up doing. So we got that on the telly anniversary special anyway.
I was going to say there's a lot of it about this year.
There's a lot of piddling around with the concept of regeneration, and I quite like the degeneration concept. I quite like how it ended up being tied to the Union, who is a sort of future incarnation of the 11 and, you know, other numbered Time Lords. Brilliantly played by Maureen O'Brien, who has definitely become the original companion actor to also do loads and loads of amazing other character stuff with Big Finish as well. Just that the whole thing was quite well done. I really liked that conclusion. I liked the bouncing between Doctors. It's kind of a shame the Eighth Doctor didn't get a release sort of dedicated to just him like all the other Doctors did. We got a good chunk of Eighth Doctor, but then he kept bouncing between Fourth and other Doctors as well. But yeah, I liked the idea of the Union. I liked the idea of degeneration, and thought it was a pretty good conclusion to that run.
It's one of those ones where I've heard each story once, and I will do another run through of them all back to back at some stage. I'll probably not do that until just before the coda comes out. I did feel a little bit put out that Paul McGann was slightly shortchanged in that he keeps, in this one, and it's even on the cover, he keeps turning into Tom Baker throughout it, and then it eventually devolves into all of them.
Becomes a free for all.
Very much so. But I thought it was good and proper and right that Carol Ann Ford was in this and was a fairly major part of this. I was delighted to hear. It's been a wee while since we heard Carol Ann Ford do at Big Finish, and was delighted to hear her again. And I like that they went for the Doctor's family, like his wife and his granddaughter here. I like that as well. So that was a big positive for the Union.
I think I'll be joining you in the sort of coda re-listen next year. I actually think, again, it'll probably be another run that benefits from being heard close together, because all the stories felt very, very, very isolated coming out a month apart. And I think actually having them as a chunk might give them a consistency that my first listen didn't have. And I may end up enjoying it a little bit more.
I was just here's a little interesting question for you. What are your predictions for the coda? What do you think will happen in the coda? Who do you think will be in the coda?
I reckon it is going to be an hour-long solo piece performed by Peter Capaldi.
We should be so lucky.
Sorry. What do I think it's going to be? I mean, I do kind of wonder, like, have Big Finish got another Doctor? Is this going to be Big Finish's introduction of Jodie Whittaker, or, you know, is there going to be there's something else there? Because we've covered all the Doctors that we expected it to cover. 1, 2, 1 to, was it 11 or 12? Did Dubman do 12 as well? He definitely did 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had Doctors 1 to 12 completely covered by it. They all popped up in some way, shape, or form. So is it going to have nothing to do with the Doctor, and is it going to be like a master dealing with degeneration thing? Is it going to be a bit of a masterful type Missy Jacoby sort of thing? Or is it, and I'm really hesitant about actually committing to this in any kind of recording, but could it be Jodie Whittaker?
I would love it to be. I don't think it will be. Certainly not for this. Although I really want to hear her do some Big Finish soon. I would love to hear more of her Doctor.
Yeah.
See, I'm fairly sure, and I might be misquoting, I might be misrepresenting this. I'm fairly sure that Big Finish said that the reason for the coda being so delayed was too similar to something that was going to happen in the 60th anniversary episodes. And now that we're past the 60th, we are in theory, or we should in theory, be able to work out what that was, because we now know everything about the 60th because we've seen it.
It's an adaptation of the Star Beast.
Never. But you know what I mean? So it could be something like that. Maybe the toy maker's in it. Maybe it involves two Doctors regenerating into two or something like that. I think it's probably going to be the Joe Martin one. I imagine it's going to be a Fugitive Doctor episode added at the last minute once they got her. But who's to know? I hope we hear and hope we find out fairly soon.
Yep, fingers crossed there will be something given to us, leaked, mentioned, hinted at, whatever. And it will be interesting to see kind of what it is. It's shrouded in mystery, certainly. And I am looking forward to listening to it immediately after the rest of the series. So shall we head on to November?
Yes, let's.
And November was fairly low-key in terms of Doctor Who releases. I do wonder if there'd been a bit of a grumpy now from Cardiff, don't get in the way of our big telly anniversary. But what we did get was a really, really good War Master set, Rogue Encounters. And the episode from Rogue Encounters that I liked the most, probably not a big surprise to anyone, the Sublime Port, which was the one where the War Master met Billis off of Torchwood. And it was just so good to see Billis meet a Time Lord, or a character that's sort of bigger than Torchwood anyway, which we've not had before. And the Master was absolutely bloody terrified of him. And it's like, oh, yeah, actually, I don't think we've ever properly explored just what Billis is. He's just kind of turned up, been a bit of a nasty bloke, and then disappeared again. So actually finding out what he was, and this story kind of dropped it very casually, actually, just kind of explained what Billis was, what his role in the universe was. And it was sort of nicely done. And it was good to have that sort of half an episode of the War Master being absolutely terrified. It was a real sort of nice twist, doing something a bit different with the character. The rest of the set was absolutely brilliant as well. Alone, which wasn't really a War Master episode. It was a Professor Yana episode. Absolutely beautifully done. Really, really strong stuff. And I'm glad that they're still finding new things to do with the War Master 10 sets in. The character still feels interesting, and a War Master set is still something to look forward to. I'm not going to say the entire run's been perfect. There have been the odd release that I've enjoyed a little bit less than others, but generally the War Master is one of Big Finish's stronger strands now. It's Derek Jacobi doing Big Finish. It's absolutely brilliant.
I thought this was a really strong set. I think the last few War Master sets, it's great that you can point and say they keep knocking it out of the park with these. And it's hard to pin down. So, a favourite episode. I enjoyed the Sublime Port, but I'm not as exposed to Billis as other people will be, and I don't know him just as well. I'd probably pin down either Manhunt or Alone as the best. I think it probably has to be Alone because it's doing something a little bit different. You're getting Professor Yana again, and it's sort of expanding on his character and his history, which was fantastic. So that was great to hear Derek Jacobi doing something a little bit different and getting Yana's history expanded on. I think they did a great job of sort of capturing the spirit of Utopia and the tone of Utopia, but again expanding on it to make that universe feel slightly larger than it appeared on screen, because it was one world, one planet, and a handful of characters really, or a handful of named characters with lines. But I think Alone expands out on that, makes it feel a lot bigger, and gives Yana an interesting little story to follow through, and inject some of that War Master evilness into it, in the form of the Master's voice coming out of the watch. So that was, and sort of souring Yana's relationship with his friend. So that was great. I would probably mark it as the highlight, but I really enjoyed Manhunt as well. Felt cool to go and play in sort of X-Files territory. I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually. I really liked it as well.
It was another great release, and this time last year we were sat here talking about how great Escape from Reality was. There seemed to be a theme of winter War Master releases just being really, really top-notch stuff. But yeah, it was definitely a good one. I'm going to give an honourable mention to The Chimes, which was a Charles Dickens adaptation, an adaptation of a Charles Dickens Christmas story, just probably not the one you were expecting. Really, really good stuff, really enjoyable. It was written by, or adapted, I should say. It was written by Charles Dickens. I've said that. It was adapted by Jonathan Morris. Did an absolutely great job. It's got a great cast, and it was a nice little sort of surprise last-minute addition to Big Finish's November calendar. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was nice to explore a lesser-known Dickens story, and it's still a Christmassy one. It's still got all the Dickens trappings. It's kind of it's definitely sort of, I guess, exists in the same universe as A Christmas Carol, I suppose is the best way of describing it. Yeah, really good little adaptation. So I'm glad we got that. I'm glad we got that sudden release. And we've kind of, the other highlight of November, I think we're going to merge with December and do it all as one thing. So there we go. Let's time travel. Here we are, December. And let's talk about both Eighth Doctor Adventures releases from this year. So Audacity and In the Bleak Midwinter. And I'm still amazed how much I love Eighth Doctor stuff from Big Finish. I'm still amazed at how consistently brilliant it is. Like, it's such a strong era. You can start at Storm Warning. You can listen straight through to where we are now, and it's just all absolutely great. I love McGann. I love the fact that McGann's had a proper era, numerous proper eras at this point, and this year's sets definitely didn't disappoint, and it was nice to have the surprise of Charlie coming back and what we were listening to actually being set in the earlier days of Eighth Doctor. And so yeah, talk to us about Audacity and In the Bleak Midwinter, Connor.
Yeah, the Eighth Doctor at Big Finish is an interesting one because he's the one Doctor who, over the years, has constantly been reinvented to match the times. Starting off in the classic mold, switching up into sort of 2005. It's almost sort of like a hybrid because the stories are very strongly themed as 2005, plus with a very Rose-like companion in Lucy Miller. But the Doctor still remained that sort of classic self, still had the classic costume and so on. And then you move up into the Livchenko era. I think it's probably fair to call it the Livchenko era. And he goes fully into the new series, then just loses all the classic trappings. And new costume, new artwork, just a totally new feeling, tone and direction for the series. Which they have now, broken from again. And gone back. So we've jumped back into the Charlie Pollard era, although it's not immediately clear that it is the Charlie Pollard era. It's the Audacity era to begin with. And Audacity's brilliant. Jay Griffiths is fantastic. Brilliant chemistry with Paul McGann. Brilliant character. I don't know if it was written specifically for Jay Griffiths, but she inhabits the character so wonderfully, and I don't think anyone else could have played her. And there hasn't been a bad story. The Devouring is a great opener. It beds the Doctor and Audacity in with one another very well. You get the last great cyber war. It's the first time the Eighth Doctor has met the Cybermen since the Silver Turk, was well over 10 years ago now. So a bit of a rematch was well overdue, and I enjoyed hearing this. Goes into it feels like a bit of a Lucy Miller era throwback by playing about in the territory of a Fourth Doctor story in Revenge of the Cybermen. But it gives us a little bit of history, builds up, shows us how that state of play in Revenge of the Cybermen came to be. And I think did it very, very well. Very interesting to hear the Vogons being expanded on in the way they were in this story. But then we get to the end of that and we get the big shock reveal that, yes, Charlie Pollard is back. And we're back into that little gap that they're carved out for themselves between the first and second series of the Eighth Doctor stories with Charlie. I thought it was great, actually. It's the Empty Man, I think, plays about and sort of fits into the Charlie era arc. About the stuff about her being, about her, how she should have been dead and died on the R101 and shouldn't have survived, etc., etc. So I like that they tied into that arc. I think it'll make it a lot more cohesive if you're listening through chronologically. I must admit that I'm still slightly in two minds about revisiting an earlier era like this while the Livchenko and Helen Sinclair stories remain unresolved. I like that they're still out there. I want to hear more from them. But I would like, I think, to hear them resolve before pivoting away to something like this. And now we have Charlie on Audacity ongoing as well. What I think helps it is that Audacity is here and adds something of a new element, that we are not just back in plain old Eighth Doctor and Charlie stories. We're getting the brilliant pairing of McGann and Fisher again, but with this new interesting element added in the form of Audacity and Jay Griffiths. It's wonderful to hear the characters again, hearing them with this new character. I always love when you get an established TARDIS crew like this and a new character just gets dropped into it, because it freshens up the whole dynamic and just makes it all feel nice and shiny and new. But we're still getting that nice little warm, nostalgic Eighth Doctor and Charlie material as well. So I think this is working really well. And I think it's brilliant that we've had a Christmas box set from the Eighth Doctor, because I think it's fair to say for a lot of Big Finish fans, the Chimes of Midnight is an indispensable part of Christmas. And I like that we're playing in that territory again with the Eighth Doctor and Charlie and Audacity in a whole Christmas box set.
I think it's definitely fair to say that both sets have worked exceptionally well. They've been really, really fun. Dipping into Christmas in that second set was absolutely great, and having being in Christmas was essentially the bad wolf of that set, the kind of thread that ran through it for a reason, for a plot reason. And I have to admit, I really enjoyed that. Like you, sort of carrying on with not necessarily Liv and Helen, but certainly Helen is on my wish list. The end point there is Liv returning to modern day Earth at the end of Stranded 4, but Helen's still travelling with the Eighth Doctor, so far as we know. And I'd quite like there to be, Eighth Doctor and Helen solo, or maybe even stick another companion in, sort of really, really shake up that particular dynamic. I think there's plenty that can be done there, and it'll be interesting to see, as and when it's all picked up, where that will go. Maybe it'll be a while before we get there, but that's definitely on the wish list. Going to not go on about it because you've already talked about it, but The Great Cyber War, what a fantastic story. Really, really solid two-parter that, I wasn't entirely sure. I was like, do we really need the Eighth Doctor adventuring into Revenge of the Cybermen territory? And, well, when I listened to it, it turned out we did. It was fantastic. It took a concept that maybe actually wasn't all that particularly exciting on paper and did something really good with it. And it sort of gave us explanations as to why the Revenge Cybermen are a bit emotional and designed differently to the others and taught differently and allergic to gold. And it just gave us a little bit more about that, and it explained all of that, and it felt perfectly organic to the story. Things that absolutely weren't a mystery in Revenge of the Cybermen were made a mystery in this, and it paid off really, really well. So yeah, what a great couple of releases, and a nice sort of beginning of the end of the year, I guess. So yeah, happy to have In the Bleak Midwinter as my December pick. And that's it. We've got to the end of the year. We've done it. Which is good because our TARDIS set with the drapes and the
no, it's all fallen down.
Circular cut, yeah, it's all fallen down. That's it.
I've just been bumped on the head by a rogue roundel.
It just means that we're going to have to get a new console room out of next season's budget, which might leave room for not much else. Like Spodcast Season 3 is going to be a new TARDIS console room, and everything else is going to be done like Underworld.
Is it going to be all white and shiny and big?
No, definitely not. But there might be two. One of them with a jukebox.
Oh yeah. Cunning. That's definitely not the same. It's not the same set at all.
No.
It's two totally different TARDISes.
Yeah, no. As tempting as it is to send you off in your own TARDIS, I'm actually going to keep you around for more podcasting, I think.
Oh, good. He's taking the P45 back. Hooray!
Yeah, you're back on the team. Okay, well, that's always good to finish on a strong joke.
Do you have any anticipated releases for next year? Just before we do.
So we've loads, all sorts. So we've obviously talked Coda already. As it's shrouded in mystery, I'm very, very interested as to what it's going to turn out to be. I am sort of aware that I'm setting myself up there for disappointment, though, and it's actually just another David Tennant story. However, we've got a few good Sontaran stories on the way. We've got Sontarans versus Rootans, and Keres is back in that, which I honestly didn't ever expect to see.
I couldn't believe that when they announced he was back. I'm delighted. I'm really delighted. But it feels like a fever dream.
What else do we know about? Obviously, conclusion of 11th Doctor and Valerie, and the Paradigm Daleks are going to be in that. And there are some very, 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 very sort of fan-baity story titles in there. So we'll see what happens.
I am excited for those. I'm really excited for those. I think the Paradigm Daleks are well overdue. I don't know if this will be a conclusion to their TV story arc or something else entirely, but they're well overdue an appearance full stop at Big Finish. Yes. So that's exciting.
And, we've got more Missy coming as well. We've got more Torchwood Soho. That's always consistently brilliant. We've got the Fourth Doctor with Harry Sullivan and Naomi, and we've heard where that ends, but certainly not where it begins. So that's coming up. Just more of it. Sadly, still only one's First Doctor and Second Doctor set. Hopefully that's something that can be rectified. Gallifrey War Room's going to continue. There's loads and loads over the next year that I'm really looking forward to. I just think that we've got a nice consistency with an awful lot now, with many ranges.
Doctor Who's finally coming to my neck of the woods. They're finally doing a Doctor Who Northern Ireland story with the Giant's Causeway, which I'm very excited for.
I hope it ends up being a Matrix projection or something like that, just to disappoint you again.
That was such a cop-out. But yeah, there's actually a lot of stuff I've forgotten about. I didn't realise they'd announced just so much for the early part of next year. Thunderbirds is coming back. I'm excited for that. You've got the 11th Doctor stuff. The 9th Doctor's coming back. They're finally doing another 8th Doctor and Eric Roberts Master set with the Axons for some reason. And you've got the 3rd Doctor and Sarah in another 6-parter, which seems to be the concluding part of a trilogy that also has the TV something in space stories as part of it. So it seems to be like a conclusion to that little trilogy, or what is now a trilogy with this story. So I'm excited for those.
A trilogy 50 years in the making.
And Classic Doctors Who Monsters is back as well in March. That set's been a long time since it was announced, and I'm really excited to hear it.
It's got Silence in, hasn't it?
It does. It has the 7th and 8th Doctors versus the Silence.
Which, I mean, 7 versus Silence, that's definitely an interesting premise just to start with. So yeah, roll on 2024 and all the big finish that it brings us.
Absolutely, can't wait.
Indeed. But we'll wrap up 2023 now. We'll leave it without our knackered TARDIS. We're gonna have to walk into 2024. I know, the long way round or something like that. I don't know. I've stretched the joke as far as I can, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, I will say thank you very much for joining me on this journey forward through 2023, going through each month and picking out our best big finish releases, Connor. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be back for more spodcasting. You see, I was going to say, and we're back for more spodcasting next year, but that's kind of like one of those people who at 7 p.m. on the 31st of December go, see you next year. And I'm not going to
wasting the day if you don't make that joke. It's a waste of a New Year's Eve if you don't make that joke. The P45's back there. It is again.
Yeah. So Spodcast will be back with an exciting new lineup next year. I'm not even replacing you. I'm recasting you. I'm getting Jacob Dubman on as a guest, and he's going to play you. So we will be back for more Spodcasting in the very near future, which may just happen to be a different year to the one in which this episode is released, because I am not doing the see you next year joke. Thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you. See you next year.